Welcome to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show, and I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Jason Barnard. Jason is the CEO of Kalicube, a company that utilizes his 25 years in digital marketing and 10 years of managing brand digital ecosystems. Kalicube helps business leaders take control of their brand narrative online and dominate the competition. Today, we're talking about how Kalicube is managing generative AI in Google search. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's absolutely delightful to be here, Richard.
Jason, I always like to ask my guests, where in the world are you?
I'm in the south of France, where it's sunny and warm and delightful with great food and wonderful wine and cheese.
Fantastic. I'm very jealous of certainly the cheese. I'm a big fan of that. Anyway, so look, let's get into the conversation. Before we get onto Kalicube, though, can you tell us a little bit about your background and the sort of things you've done and how it's led to the creation of Kalicube?
Yeah, I actually moved to France 35 years ago and joined a punk folk band playing the double bass. That was quite successful. I was a professional punk folk musician, which is kind of cool.
So a very traditional way of doing things by the sounds of it.
No, and it gets even less traditional because after that stopped, I started a website with my wife with a blue dog and a yellow koala with kids' games that became the 10,000th biggest site in the world, competing with Disney, the BBC, PBS, and the other huge hitters in that field. In 2007, we did 1 billion page views with a site for children aged up to 10. And that's how I learned digital marketing. We went from 0 to 1 billion page views in a year in less than 10 years.
That's absolutely amazing. And what was the process that you went through to achieve that?
A lot of it was Google. There were absolutely multiple approaches. Number one was create the best content that's hugely well focused on the right audience, stand where that audience is looking, in this case, children, which is nursery schools, the parents' house, on the right websites for kids with recommendations. Make sure that everybody's happy, especially the parents. Make sure the kids are enjoying what they're watching and they're playing, and make sure that you get to the top of the search engines. And we took a huge bet on Google in 1998 when it started, and Google was still a small player. And it turned out we took the right bet and ended up with 1 million visits a month from Google alone.
Amazing. Finally, before we get into Kalicube itself, in the introduction, I mentioned brand narrative. Can you give us a baseline of what that really is to help with the conversation?
Yeah, I think one mistake a lot of companies and even people make is that they spend a lot of time thinking about what is my brand and how do I want it to be represented. They come up with the little catchphrases, the logos, the way they speak, what they're trying to say to their audience, and the personality that they're pushing across to the audience. And then they don't translate it online in a way that anybody truly understands. And from our perspective, we look at Google to see how Google is representing your brand narrative. How close is it to the way you want it to be represented? And because Google sees the whole internet, Google summarizes that internet in the search result for your name. So that's the best way to see how well your brand narrative is coming across to your audience wherever they're standing online.
Very interesting. So let's get into Kalicube. What does it do?
It analyzes Google search results for your brand name to understand how well Google understands you. Are you standing in the right places? Are you saying the right things? Are you resonating with your audience? And then we have a platform, Kalicube Pro. It's a SaaS platform for agencies that will tell you where you're doing things right, where you're doing them wrong, which things you aren't doing that you should be doing, and which things you're doing that you shouldn't be doing.
So what is the metrics that you pass on to agencies that gives them that information, that gives them that guidance?
We have AI built into the platform, which analyzes Google's search results and then prioritizes what needs to be done for the brand, both in terms of communicating its narrative accurately and consistently across the internet, but also what they need to do in their digital marketing strategy in the wider sense to better talk to their audience, better resonate with their audience. So what it is put the brand name into Kalicube, push a button, the digital marketing strategy and the brand narrative strategy are spat out in about 15 minutes.
That's really amazing. So it's not just metrics, it's actually advice on what they need to do as next steps.
Yes, and then metrics, of course, which was the question, and I didn't really answer the question. I do apologize.
That's okay.
Is measurements of the search results translated into numbers, representations, colors that are easy to understand, easy to report on, and easy to communicate with your audience as an agency, which is your client, and say to them, this is what it looked like 5 months ago, this is what it looks like today, we can see the progress, and you can see, interestingly enough, your revenues increasing. Because what happens when you implement what we call the Kalicube process using Kalicube Pro is that you will start to resonate better with your audience wherever they're looking online outside of Google. You will resonate better with them on your website, and that will push up the conversion rate. It will push up the number of leads. It will push up the number of people who come to you and say, I know what you do. I just now need to know how much it's going to cost me. And then as you move forwards, Google will gradually understand, and not only would it represent your brand when your audience searches your brand name in a way that resonates better with them and with you, but it will start to understand who you can serve, when you can serve them well, and therefore will present you as a recommended solution to their problem when they search on Google in a wider sense. And that's when we're going to come later on to generative AI in search, which is Google's interpretation of its own search results and its recommendations of what the best solution for its user who's searching on Google would be.
So it sounds like this is a significant step beyond the traditional SEO type approach. And you're not only helping people with their results in Google, but just generally across the board and make their sites better.
Yeah, I get a lot of people telling me, oh, you're an SEO, which I'm not anymore.
No.
I used to be. I'm now a digital marketer. I'm just using my knowledge of Google, our analysis of Google, and Google's knowledge of your brand and your competitors' brands online to better understand where you need to be, what you need to do, what your strategy globally should be in digital marketing.
So let's get into that then. Generative AI and Google search. How is this working together?
Google have really just launched it, and they've launched it to a closed set of people. I have access, so I know how it works. I've been analyzing it. And it will launch fully probably at the end of this year, 2023, maybe the beginning of 2024. But what is very interesting is Google is now saying, well, initially we had the 10 blue links. So you got to choose from the 10 blue links. As results have improved, we've moved that down to maybe the top 5 or 6 that people actually look at. And with generative AI, what Google does is takes its own results, summarizes them, gives its opinion, and recommends what you should do next. So it's creating a conversation that guides you towards the solution to your problem, which is what you're doing when you're searching on Google. You're expressing a problem to which you're looking for the solution. So it's rebuilding the funnel. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No. Please keep going. It's we always have delays with the internet, so you never know how this can always pan out. What I was going to ask you though was the conversation that's happening. Is that between Google as a search engine and the end user, or is it with the agencies that you're working with?
Right, which is a great question. With Google's search generative experience, they call it, and I find that quite clunky and difficult to say, but the reasoning for them behind it is they want to focus on search, and they want to keep search alive. So they've called it search generative experience, and it's generative AI in the search results. So Google's search generative experience is having a conversation with its own users, and you could look at this and say, it's having a conversation with the subset of its users who are my audience. And that's where you need to focus, is saying which cohort of users that Google has are truly my audience, and what conversation is Google going to have with them. And I need to try to guide Google in its conversation. And I was talking about funnels earlier on. I need to guide it so it understands my funnel, so it can guide the user down the funnel in a very simple manner.
Interesting. And how much of a step change do you think this is going to be for the end user and the company that are wanting to promote their own product? Because, Google's been incredibly successful and everybody's very excited about AI. How is this going to improve things? What's going to be the change?
Well, for users first, it's going to become simpler and faster to get from I have a problem to I have a solution, in the sense that you will ask a question, or a search query is an implicit question or it's an explicit question. But if I just search for red shoes, there's an implicit question behind that. It's not an obvious implicit question. If I say I want to buy red shoes, that's an explicit question. But either way, there is a question in there or a problem being expressed. I start a conversation as a user with Google, who will guide me towards from red shoes to how can I buy red shoes, or where can I buy red shoes? And it will do that in a conversational manner by summarizing its own understanding of the internet and its own opinion of the internet. So what happens is the user no longer jumps from Google to a site and then back, then to another site for more information, and then back, and then to another site for more information and back. They will have the whole conversation on Google.
So that's interesting. So are you saying that with this approach, Google will actually keep contact with the customer for longer?
Yeah, Google's aim is to get its users to the solution to their problem as efficiently as possible. And in our industry, in the SEO industry, well, our industry, it's no longer my industry directly, there's a lot of people complaining that Google will no longer send people to the websites. But I talked to Fabrice Canel, who's the program manager at Bing, who said, well, actually, what's going to happen is there's going to be multiple ways that people will use search generative AI, and it's going to increase the usage. And what will now happen is if the company has managed to communicate to us what their funnel looks like, what their users are looking for, and how we can guide them to the solution to their problem on that specific website, what will happen is the user will have a much faster, much better, and much more comfortable journey to the bottom of the funnel, and we will send them when they're ready at the bottom of the funnel. Or we will send them at the top of the funnel if they really want to research the topic in detail. So what he's saying is, we will actually save you time and effort, and we will send you the people who are ready to buy, or the people who really want to research very broadly.
So if I was to summarize what I think I've heard here, this whole process, and with the work that you do and the new paradigms that are coming from our friends at Google, it will get that end user to be able to buy your products in the fastest way possible.
Yes, exactly. And an example would be Kalicube. Our company, we have the platform which deals with generative AI, it deals with digital marketing strategies, and we can educate Google in a very efficient way, which is to say to Google, here is a fact, and get it to believe that fact. Now, I'm going to come back a small step. Google has a thing called the knowledge graph, and it's full of information. It's like a machine-readable Wikipedia. But Wikipedia has 50 million articles, and the knowledge graph currently has at least 1,500 billion facts.
Okay.
Google's understanding of the world is in that knowledge graph, that machine-readable Wikipedia. And we have the technology to feed information and facts into that machine. And if you can feed the facts into the machine, into the knowledge graph, the Wikipedia for machines, you can then guide that machine in terms of its understanding of who you are, what you do, which audience you serve, which allows it to then guide the user down the funnel.
So rather than you put your brand out there and Google basically looks at your website and you hope for the best, no, you are directly influencing how Google sees an individual brand, individual product, and getting it to the top of the pile in the fastest way possible.
Yeah. I've got a friend called Jano van Dreel, who's a specialist in the schema markup language, which is the machine readable language of understanding facts in a structured way. That's called explicit semantics. And what we do at Kalicube is build websites, build digital strategies, build brand narratives as implicit semantics. which is basically doing exactly the same thing, but structuring it in a human readable format. So we're winning on both fronts. The human being looking at this content, my audience, hopefully who will then become a client, but also the machines can understand it, even though it's implicit for them, they can understand it because it's so well organized. So it's very proactively organizing content for these machines. And I'll give you a really quick example about coming down the funnel, is if you search for knowledge panel, and that's the representation on Google's search engine results of the knowledge graph. It's a thing on the right on the desktop when you search for somebody's name. If you search for my name now, Jason Barnard, Jasonbarnard, you will see the knowledge panel on the right, and that's Google's representation of the facts about me pulled from its knowledge graph machine readable encyclopedia. And if you search for knowledge panel, Google will say a knowledge panel is blah, 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 and it will cite us. It will say Kalicube says this about it. Then it will suggest a question, a follow-up question, which is, how can I get a knowledge panel? Then it will cite our system of how to get a knowledge panel, which is step 1, step 2, step 3. Then it will suggest a follow-up question, which is, who can get me a knowledge panel, or who can sell me a knowledge panel? And it will give you a list of possible providers. Kalicube is right at the top, above Fiverr and another couple of sites that I can't remember off the top of my head. So what Google has done there is brought somebody from a general query about knowledge panels to how do I get one, to who can sell me one, and then they send that person to Kalicube because we can solve that problem for them.
So it sounds like you're both a facilitator and a translator on behalf of both the human side and the machine side there.
Oh, that's a lovely way of putting it. Thank you very much. I think I might steal that and use it in my next interview.
You are more than welcome. So going back a step to the introduction again, I mentioned that Kalicube helps business leaders take control of the brand narrative and dominate the competition. Okay, so what is the conversation that you have? What's the journey that you take business leaders through to achieve that?
Right. The brand narrative is the most important thing, and we need to start with that. So the first thing we do with a client is say to them, what is your brand? What do you have? What do you offer? To whom do you offer it? And how do you present that brand to the audience that you're trying to convince to become clients? Once we've defined that, we say we've got the audience, we've got the brand narrative. Now we're going to figure out where they stand, where they're looking, and where you need to stand to be where they're looking. And that's, for example, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium, Forbes magazine, wherever it might be online. And make sure that you're creating the content that resonates with them. And Google tells us whether it resonates by whether or not it will push that particular result into the brand searches. And we will make sure that when you're communicating with them, the brand narrative is clear. And once again, we can see that through Google if the brand narrative coming from that particular platform is not clear. And then we correct all of the things that aren't clear, all of the things that aren't resonating. We reduce investment and time spent on the things that aren't working or would never work. And we increase the work of the client on the parts of their digital ecosystem that are either unclear and need improvement and will work, or are clear but not engaging enough and need more engagement with the audience, and we help them there too.
So you said something very interesting there for me. You're not only helping companies sell more, but you're also showing them what isn't working so they can potentially save money and put that same money into the areas that are successful.
Yeah, Leanne Summers, who works at Kalicube, calls that shape shifting.
Very interesting.
Shift the shape of your team so they're focusing on different things. So the Kalicube Pro platform does two things. It analyzes your digital ecosystem through Google. And then it takes what we call the entity equivalence, which is the cohort, the market, the category, and it analyzes them. So we then have, where are you standing? What's your situation in terms of digital marketing, digital presence, and digital narrative, brand narrative? And what does the competition look like as a group? So for example, if you're focusing on LinkedIn, but the cohort, the market is focusing on Facebook, we can tell you, well, LinkedIn's great, so don't drop it because it's working, because we can see it in the results from Google that Kalicube Pro has analyzed. But now let's start looking at Facebook, because that is what Google expects the cohort to be looking at and working on. That's where the competition is. And Google agrees with the competition that that is where the audience is standing and looking. So let's move some resources from LinkedIn to Facebook, and it works every time.
That's really interesting. So can you give me any examples, and obviously you don't need to name names, of organizations where you've actually really turned things around for them using the processes that you have?
Yeah, I can even name names, which is delightful. We're in France, and one amazing client we had who worked with us for 2 years had search traffic dropping 30% year on year, and he was freaking out, safe to say. And he initially came to us for SEO, search engine optimization. And we pushed him through the Kalicube process. We used Kalicube Pro, and he was semi-convinced. And for 6 months, it was very difficult to keep him on board. And by the end of the year, we'd turned not only his acquisition away from Google, i.e. he was acquiring clients from other sources around the web, and his revenues were up, but we'd saved his Google drop, and he was back to what he was at before. And by the end of the second year, he was 30% up on Google. So if you think about that, he was relying 100% on Google. We shifted his reliance on revenue away from Google, increased his revenue, whilst recovering the Google performance. So the second year, when the Google performance pushed up, he was getting the double revenue. He's so happy. We had another client called UBG, who were an eSIM company. They integrated our Kalicube process over 4 years. They're now seeing 160% growth in Google traffic and significantly more, and I can't cite the number, in revenues every single year. And it's a flywheel once you get it going, because you have a rounded digital marketing strategy where you're not just relying on Google, you're relying on different channels for different touch points. And the ultimate is that your audience will ultimately search your brand name on Google. And when you see that happening, that number of brand searches on Google goes up and up and up and up. That's when the flywheel is really flying.
That's really interesting. So there's a real step change away from what has become the accepted status quo. You put your advertising dollars into Google. But what you're actually talking about is a living, breathing system that actually puts people into the right direction, shows people where they need to spend, and helps clients find what they need to be buying.
Yeah, and reduces reliance on Google, but actually helps with Google medium to long term, and reduces ad dollar spend, because once you have that, all those touch points, you end up with the branded search, you end up with the Google search, and now we'll end up with the search generative experience. And that's the key, is in the future, and that's what we're now building for, is we, as you said, are facilitating the messaging to Google so Google can reproduce our funnel, and Bing can reproduce our funnel and bring people down, as in the example I told you earlier, knowledge panel, how to get a knowledge panel, who can sell me a knowledge panel. And nobody less than Fabrice Canel from Bing, who is the principal program manager at Bing, in a private conversation told me that is exactly what we're doing. You've nailed it, Jason.
It sounds like you're doing some amazing things there. So obviously you've got your head around AI and you're understanding what many of the big players are doing. Where do you see AI going in the business world? How much do you think it's going to change things from where we are right now?
I think businesses are going to use it more and more because it's so accessible and it saves an awful lot of time, saves resources. Now the question is the business going to say, well, this is a huge saving in money? Or are they going to say, this is an opportunity to do more, be more effective, be more visible? And I would argue that if you take the first choice, your business will be fine, but you're liable to be left behind by the people who say, well, this is an opportunity, maybe not to spend as much, but spend more than I would otherwise do. Use the AI to increase my presence online, to increase my communication, but don't do it ad hoc. Don't just rely on the AI, because you will lose your brand narrative. And you need to build the brand narrative in. And that's one thing that AI can't do, is fully reproduce your voice, fully understand what it is you're trying to do. And I'll tell you a really nice example of that, of a mistake we made. And that's part of what Kalicube's all about. And it's always been about that for me. I make mistakes on myself when I'm trying things out, because then I know what not to do for my clients. So I don't put my clients in danger, I put myself in danger, or my company. And we were using AI to create LinkedIn posts. And we just posted a LinkedIn post for an interview that I was doing with a lady called Teodora Petkova, who's an absolute genius. And she, halfway through the show, said, "Was that LinkedIn post done with generative AI?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, it didn't look like it. It read incredibly well. And the brand voice wasn't far off because we've trained our own bot. So our bot, the Kali bot, actually speaks with our brand voice reasonably closely." But she said the problem is that the AI overpromised on what we were going to talk about. The AI did not know what we were going to talk about. It took a good guess. And it turns out what we talked about, even what we planned to talk about, wasn't what the AI said. So anybody coming to the show from the AI-generated LinkedIn post was disappointed. So I now have 25 people who are disappointed by what they saw, and they have a negative view of Kalicube, not a positive view of Kalicube, because we did not deliver.
Now, this is very, very interesting, because I'm hearing the same story time and time again, whether it's individuals down at the lowest level just trying out ChatGPT for the first time, or the very advanced work that you're doing. You still need to infuse the whole system with a truly authentic voice, your own voice, because otherwise bad things can happen.
Yep, 100%. And especially if you scale that out, and I think people aren't seeing it yet, if you scale it out, you're going to hit a huge wall, which is going to be, you're going to look like everybody else. And brand is what sells. Do you resonate with my brand narrative? Does my brand narrative resonate with you as a user, you as a potential client, you as a prospect, you as a client eventually? And so by ensuring that we spend the time to correct the AI interpretation of what people want to hear, which is based on what people already hear. So you have the situation where the AI is not being original, and what brand narrative is all about is being yourself, being original, and being true to who you are, which is what Teodora Petkova loves to say.
So AI is a long way from being just a simple thing that people can throw at problems and hope for the best and just assume it's going to get done. There still has to be effort to get things to work well.
Yeah. And I mean, if you take it to its very simplest, we've trained Calibot on 2 million words that I have spoken or written in the last 2 years. I had to produce those 2 million words, and that's just to get Calibot to speak with our brand voice. And it's still not perfect, and we still have to correct it. But it can't think of things that I want to say in the future. So this interview, for example, Calibot would just tell you everything that I've already said to everybody else, whereas you've interviewed me, and I'm saying a lot of original stuff that I've never said before.
Very interesting. So, Jason, a question I always like to ask my guests: if there's one piece of advice that they can take away from this episode, what would it be?
Be very wary of following digital strategies, especially branded strategies, that are set in stone and systemized by whoever is doing it, whether it's in-house or an agency. Because, as you said earlier on, your digital ecosystem is living and breathing. It changes over time. Your market changes over time. And what we do at Kalicube is build a bespoke strategy that is the most efficient, effective, and profitable strategy for you, based on Google's analysis of your digital ecosystem and Google's analysis of your competitive landscape. So make sure that you're thinking constantly, where should I put the resources to be standing where my audience is looking, wherever that might be online, present to them my brand and my solution in a way that resonates with them, and indicate to them clearly the next step, which would be ultimately search my brand on Google, come and see what Google thinks of me, because that search result is Google's opinion of you. It's your Google business card. Google will recommend me. Come in and buy.
Fantastic. Great advice. Jason, where can people find you, and do you have any exciting new projects on the horizon?
Yeah, I just mentioned Google Business Card. that's how I started this whole thing, is that when you search my name 15 years ago, it said Jason Barnard is a cartoon blue dog. And I set about changing that. So it now says Jason Barnard is a hugely talented digital marketer. And you can connect with him on his website, on his company website, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, read his articles, see his videos, watch his podcast, listen to his podcast, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you when you search my name, Jason Barnard, JasonBarnard, to decide how you engage with me. That's my Google business card. That's how I ask people to engage with me and find out more about me. And from a project perspective, the Kalicube Pro platform for agencies is starting to really become the destination for digital marketing, SEO, PR agencies to create bespoke strategies for their clients, build knowledge panels for their clients, solve online reputation management problems for their clients. And we're launching an increased, and this is lovely, and it wasn't what I was planning to say, but I just realized I built it myself with my own little hands last weekend. And I was talking about cohort analysis, and a cohort is a group of people or a group of companies who act in a similar manner. So they move around together. It will basically be a market. And we've implemented cohort analysis for competitors years ago. And we've just implemented cohort analysis for multiple types of competitors and audiences. So you can figure out where your audience is hanging out, because your audience and where they're hanging out, let's say Facebook, is not necessarily the place that your competitors are hanging out and talking to their particular group. And what we've realized at Kalicube is a lot of us tend to talk amongst ourselves in a professional circle, and that's the cohort we're in. But if I want to target lawyers, which is what we're going to do at the end of this year, to build knowledge panels, to get into Google's knowledge graph, to improve their presentation so they look more authoritative and respectful, then I need to figure out where lawyers are looking, where they're hanging out, so that I can then communicate with them and offer them our services. And I think that's huge. Multiple cohort analysis is the current project at Kalicube Pro.
That sounds very exciting. Well, Jason, thank you for a really intriguing conversation. And, a lot of new things have come up today. I've certainly learned a lot. I wish you and Kalicube the best of success going forward.
Thank you so much, Richard. I hope your wishes are transformed into a glorious future for Kalicube.
Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage show. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI Advantage today.